This is exciting. All right. We're live.
We are. Hello, everyone. This is Skyfall Blind Dreamer. Welcome to the third in my interview series. This is Dr. Elliott Gish, PhD. I met him at the International Dream Conference in Tucson, Arizona in July of this year. And we are going to discuss basically as much as we can involving, him, his background, lucid dreaming research, and just all of that. So how about you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody?
Thanks, Ryan. Like Ryan said, Elliott Gish. I have been in love with lucid dreaming for about a decade now. Ever since I got introduced to it, it was the movie Inception that really kicked everything off for me. I was studying psychology at undergrad, and I didn't know lucid dreaming existed until I rented the movie Inception and saw it. And I thought, what the heck is this? I've never heard of this phenomenon. I had never had one myself. I was about 20 years old. And so then, of course, like any person interested in lucid dreaming, I Googled everything I could at that time and found out that lucid dreaming is a thing that you can teach yourself and get better at. It's a skill. So, of course, I taught myself how to do it. And it probably took about a month of kind of shots in the dark with different techniques. But I got my first lucid dream, and that was, God, I was 20 years old. So that was probably back in about 2011, 2010, somewhere in there. And I've had hundreds.
Let's just try this. Computer, when did the movie Inception come out?
That's a good one.
Here is what I found. Inception was filmed in Tangier, Morocco.
No.
Fortress Mountain.
Computer,
Alberta.
Stop. That's not what I asked.
it was about 2010. It was about 2010,
yes.
Somewhere.
I remember watching that movie, and I wouldn't find out what lucid dreaming was until the year of hell, 2020, and that year was consumed by a C word that we can't say. But basically, COVID basically screwed up the whole world. October 2020 comes around. I find out about lucid dreaming because I ran across it. I just listening to YouTube videos and someone mentioned it. I thought, you know what? I remember dreams. Dreams are awesome. I can imagine like really well. This sounds cool as hell. And I was like, and then of course I got into all the YouTube misinformation. And what really got me into learning lucid dreaming was somebody recommended Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. I don't know who. I was, being the curious sort that I am, I like to read. And I read it. And once I got to the point where you started describing Mild in chapter 3, waking up in the dream world, for anyone who is curious, I started having questions, and then no one could answer them. And that was my first indication that, not everything was as it was presented. And then I found someone who could actually teach me, if he is here. At least one of the people who has taught me over the past 2 years is here today. I have someone who's going to be a moderator just in case. Now, my audience is usually pretty well behaved, but some.
Awesome.
Basically, everyone here basically knows who I am. These are all.
I would hope so. It's your live stream, man.
The Dream Cafe Discord is very highly represented here. These are people who actually come watch my videos. These are regulars here, most of them.
Yeah, very cool. So, do you remember the YouTube that it first introduced you? Because it sounded like it was kind of like a side comment.
Infographic show was the first one that introduced it to me, and then it was the Explore Lucid Dreaming channel. But this here.
Well, that's that's cool. It seems like lucid dreaming is getting more known in the public sphere, so that's very exciting.
I just wish it was getting more known accurately instead of being misrepresented.
Yeah, but that's almost like it's a sign of how big it's getting, right? Mm-hmm. Because any phenomenon that gets to a certain size, gets to a certain visibility, there's always going to be misinformation. So it's almost like an achievement that lucid dreaming has. And of course there's a lot of misinformation, which is irritating. I had to cipher through all of it when I was first starting out, and that's actually why I ended up getting into research and kind of study in graduate school, because I was trying to separate the truth from the false with lucid dreaming stuff. And what I kept coming back to was the science, right? Because you can't really argue with research too much. You have data and evidence for your positions. versus just saying things willy-nilly. So that's what I liked about the scientific aspect of it. And that's what got me into it. And that's why I wanted to further it, because when I looked into it, yeah, there's a few hundred studies or so, maybe 1,000 out there at this point, but it's still such a small field. And there seems to be so much potential benefit for humanity, in many different ways, that I figured this is something I could easily dedicate the rest of my life to, and hopefully further the field in my own little way. So
I would actually love to do the same thing. I've been teaching people now on Discord for like over 600 days, and so yeah, it's quickly become my life's passion. I really enjoy it. I enjoy teaching it, enjoy helping other people, and I would love if there's anything I can do to forward the field myself, I would definitely love to. But yeah, you just answered my question. I was going to ask what got you into actually researching it, and it was, actually wanting to learn more about it. And that's important. And of course, one thing I know that you mentioned is, how little is actually done in terms of research on dreams and lucid dreaming. You talked about 300 studies. I remember reading in your course, was it 3 days ago, one of your pages where it referenced that, in the medical field, say 400,000 studies have been done.
Oh yeah, there was hundreds of thousands, and there's I mean probably 1,000 a day or something like that. Maybe not that many, but hundreds a day. So it's hard. That field is so big. Of course, it's like one of the oldest fields and one of the most important, being medicine and health. But comparatively speaking, this is a very, very small field. Fringe psychology at this point. And psychology is really kind of a baby scientific field in and of itself. It was one of the last ones to really develop here recently. And
I correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think, in terms of recent developments, there's a lot going into actual like neuroscience. People are trying to figure out how the brain works. And the issue is there's just a lot that just isn't known. It's like you can see that X causes Y, but you don't know why X causes Y.
Exactly. There's a lot of unknowns. I mean,
it is, basically like the final frontier of biology is the brain.
Yeah, in many ways. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Biology is a huge one because neurobiology, I mean, you can really change things up that way. In fact, I tried to do that for my master's thesis, because when I was first learning lucid dreaming, I found that supplements were a big help to me, and specifically the galantamine. And I wanted to actually research that in myself or in others. But when my school came back and said, no, since we were a psychology school, I graduated from Saybrook University. They said, there's a liability issue there. We're not a medical school, and therefore we can't okay you to, take certain even if they are over the counter medications or supplements, in order to try and further research. So I ended up just combining some cognitive techniques and trying that out. And that was okay, but it was more just to complete the degree than anything. But yeah, neurobiology and the aspects with lucid dreaming were what I want to do for my master's thesis. And there's been studies since that have been published, LaBerge and Baird and Lamarca, and also Sparrow and Hurd. They in like 2018, there's a couple studies that came out that really showed galantamine helped above and beyond the placebo effect. But that's another aspect that we shouldn't overlook, right? The placebo effect, because I think both of them, or at least the LaBerge one, they looked at the placebo versus 4 milligrams versus 8 milligrams. And placebo, if I remember right, was about half of the 4 milligrams, the effects. So, that's not to be discounted. There's definitely a placebo aspect to it, right? But I don't think we ever discussed this, but did you ever try any supplements, Ryan? You seem to initiate enough by yourself.
I've never had the need to. And also,
I bet.
Also, here's the thing, I'm an opportunist and also kind of like a frugalist too. I don't have a ton of money, so if I don't have to spend money to do something, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Well, and
and that's the thing I love about lucid dreaming, right? All of us dream, or basically all of us dream. So therefore we can all learn lucid dreaming, and it's free. You don't have to pay a dime for it, right? So yeah, that's another thing I love about it. it's for the people, you know.
Yeah, and also,
So
hearing more about some of the supplements and stuff, like, even the good ones, like, one of the things that they can tend to do is, one of the side effects can be making it harder to fall asleep. Now, I'm a very light sleeper anyway, so I don't
yeah,
need to be kept more awake or more aware, rather.
indeed,
I
yeah,
kind of already
hmm
have that going for me. So I,
yeah, yeah.
I would probably find it a lot harder to actually fall asleep, and then of course there's the expectation factor of that too. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
also on so many other medications for my kidney transplant and other stuff. That yeah, it's probably not a good idea medically speaking for me.
Yeah, yeah, you don't wanna be
Um,
mixing it for sure, and they're not needed, honestly.
yeah,
You
they're
don't
not
need
needed.
supplements to have lucid dreaming. I mean,
Hmm.
you're a perfect example, right? But when I was stumbling through my first learning experiences, a decade ago or so, it's like 12 years now.
Hmm.
I definitely found them as a boon to my lucid dreaming induction. They were a nice little supplement, like kind of like training wheels
I
to
was
to get the
just
whole
thinking that.
process started. Yeah,
Mm.
and that's the way I recommend it if I am teaching. Obviously always being observant of other medications you're on, like yourself, and always wanting to consult a physician, but the galantamine is fairly mild, so you don't have to worry about too many side effects, especially if you're taking lower dosages, which is usually what's recommended with lucid dreaming. Um, but yeah, yeah, it can definitely help out, especially if you're only using it for a certain period of time. Not like every single night, because that's obviously not the right way to take it. It's gonna cause all kinds of issues. But yeah, taking it a couple times a week for a few months just to kind of get used to the lucid
Mhm.
dreaming induction process, it's a great way to start. It can really help out.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I've been teaching lucid dreaming for about 5 years or so now. I started, I taught myself, like I said, but I didn't, I actually didn't think about teaching others until several years ago. And I was studying psychology and I was getting my PhD, but I had never thought about teaching others. I felt like I could teach myself, but I didn't know if I could teach others how to do it.
I think that's a
And
difference in learning environment. So, for example,
yeah,
and it's a difference in, like, just your environment. I'm as someone who, can learn things reasonably quickly, I find it
hmm
that I actually enjoy teaching other people or helping other people learn something. If I
hmm
know how to do it and can explain it to other people, I will
yeah,
explain it to other people, and I feel like I can do that reasonably well. But also there's the
yeah,
community aspect. I learned in a community. I learned by being taught by others who were taught by
hmm
others who researched things, and I learned in the community aspect. So I'm surrounded by people all the time while I'm learning. So of course I'm going to help them, and that's just natural.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a great point. That's a great point. And that's actually one of the things I want to study. So I would love to do a study on like the educational factors, because I really want to kind of iron out some ideas about what are these individual differences that we all have and how we can all learn lucid dreaming best. So some people kind of prefer the self-study course format. Some people
Mhm.
prefer the community format, like a group
Yeah.
workshop or something like that. And some people prefer the one-on-one. So yeah, I've been interested, and that's one of the studies I'll end up doing in the next few years is
I
kind of
yeah.
looking at these different formats
My
and,
my
and
personal
seeing how
approach,
effective
and
they are.
you my personal approach, and you've probably done similar, is in a group environment, I tend to point people to resources and answer specific questions they have when they're reading. And then in
Yeah.
a DM environment, I'll do some of that, and then I'll explain things in more detail. And then I prefer, like, when I can get the chance, I like to do one-on-one voice calls, because then I'll go into specific detail and I'll actually work with someone through their dreams. I'll actually teach people how to rescript dreams, and I'll do stuff like
Yeah.
that, like on voice, which I actually enjoy doing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's what I found is the one-on-one environment is unique in the sense of you're able to take their specific instances, right? And meet people where
Mhm.
they're at, because everyone's different, right? Some people have great sleep schedules, consistent sleep,
Mhm.
and great dream recall. So you don't
Yes.
have to touch on that stuff too much. But some people aren't getting, a lot of people these days aren't getting great sleep and don't have great dream recall. So you kind of have to start
Yeah.
there instead. So
I've
yeah,
run yeah.
it's nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've run the gauntlet of people having no dream recall ever to people remembering like 4 dreams a night without ever having to do anything. So,
Mhm.
it's It's essentially, you definitely get that, but I like the one-on-one thing because what one-on-one is really good for is adaptability. You're able to, especially in
Exactly.
like a
Yep.
vocal conversation, you're able to adapt to someone's experience on the fly, and you're able
Yep.
to, modulate what you're discussing based on the feedback you were getting in the moment. It's not something you can do as
Yeah.
easily in text. A group
Exactly.
chat, you can kind of do that a little bit, or a DM chat, you
hmm
can kind of do that a little bit, but you're not going to have as good of results as you will in a vocal communication, in my view.
That's exactly right. I mean, because you're able to, like you said, answer questions on the fly. You can come prepared with like a certain lesson plan, but then you can diverge as needed and just help people out. And that's how I've
Yeah.
always learned the best, is with people one on one who are passionate about the topic that they're teaching, right? Who
Mhm.
know a lot and can get you excited about the topic that they're teaching, no matter what it is. Like I had a teacher in high school who taught geometry. I did not like geometry. I did not like math, but this guy got me excited about it. It was very invigorating. So yeah, it's teachers can make all the difference,
Yeah.
especially the ones who actually are passionate about what they teach.
I've got a feature to show you about StreamYard. First off, Cappuccino said that he wished he was somebody who could, recall dreams a lot. He said, "I wish I were one of those that need to recall more dreams." Supernova has a question for you, and I'm going to hit this button, and now it can be
Sure.
seen by everyone. He
Oh,
asks,
what technique am I doing
"What?"
at night to lucid dream?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, there's several different techniques. And I'm sure you probably do some of these as well, and we can talk about it a little bit. Mild is a big one for me.
that's
That
my
seems
main
to be
one.
highly
Yeah.
effective. Both, it's important to do both waking practices and sleeping practices though, because if you're
Mhm.
doing just one or the other, it doesn't really work. And a lot of people will only do the sleeping practices. So the waking practices are very important.
Yeah.
Um, the wake back to bed a little bit. Um, I am also a light sleeper like Ryan. So I find that I can't wake myself up too much, or else I will have a very hard time getting back to sleep.
Mm.
So I'll usually wake back to bed. For me, I found the sweet spot is probably around 5 hours, 5.5 hours,
Yeah.
and then staying up for even just 5, 10 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
15. 30 is way too long for me. I'll
Yes,
usually, yeah,
I
yeah, go ahead.
avoid classical sleep interruption in that sense because of it would, if I
Yeah,
stayed up that long, it would take me at least that long to fall back asleep. Now, what I usually
yeah,
do when I decide to weaponize one of my wakings or to use it, I just, when I wake up, I think about the dreams I can remember, do a technique, go back to bed immediately. I don't even sit up or get out of bed. That's
yeah,
usually what
and
I
and
do.
that's a great one too. And that's why recently I've kind of been playing with Raduga's hypnopompic stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's kind of like dream
Mhm.
exit induced lucid dreaming, where
Wild.
yeah, exactly. You're focused on waking up from a dream and then like not really moving, opening your eyes, and then working
Yeah.
with your imagination and hypnopompic hallucinations that way,
You're
specifically
basically
through
you're basically
movement
kind of
stuff.
anchoring with your imagination, falling back asleep with it. And I usually
Yeah.
kind of consider that in a DILD is you're kind of weaponizing the state of the transition. You're trying not to fully wake up and trying to
You're
fall back asleep.
weaponizing it.
Weaponize, yeah, I use the term weaponize a lot. Take full, make full use of it for optimum advantage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I would
Utilize,
agree with that.
weaponize.
Yeah,
You're making it full
yeah,
use of optimum advantage of it. You're trying to be
yeah.
tactical, strategic with it. Make the best use of it as you possibly can. Um, I plays games. Ask Dr. Elliott, is there a way to get longer lucids? My lucids have always been at least. I think he says at least 1 minute, but might be a
Yeah,
typo.
yeah, for sure. Well, just to finish out on the other question real quick, the techniques there's plenty of different other techniques I use. Those are kind of the main ones. The hypnopompic stuff has really been working well for me recently in terms of not having to put in much effort and actually get results. And then I also want to mention obviously the senses induced, because I've been
Mhm.
exploring that recently, and it's similar to the mild in its effectiveness is what I've found personally. And again, doesn't take much effort. And
It's
that's like the
interesting.
cycling through the senses stuff.
Yes, we do
Um,
actually teach that one as well, though there are different ways people go about doing it. So I'll look into how you actually teach it, and I'll actually let you do that here. Also, a question I know the answer to. Someone asked, "Do you go by Dr. Elliott or Dr. Gish?" I know the answer to this one, but I'll let you handle
Just
that.
Elliott, man. I
Yep.
don't need the doctor title. Yeah, no, it's all good. I don't need any of that.
But yeah, explain how you teach SSLD, because I like to compare it to what we generally tell people and what the guides that we use recommend.
Sure. So the way I understand it is basically how it was written out in a research study. I think this was done by Denholm Aspie. I might be mispronouncing that. I apologize. I don't know. But he reached out to the guy who originally invented it. From what I understand, it was invented on a Chinese forum, or originally posted on a Chinese forum.
Yes.
And he reached out to the guy to learn how he did it and kind of put the relative instructions in this study. So that's what I always reference and the way I practice it. But it's basically cycling through your senses. So it's similar to the mild in that you're waking up after like 4 to 6 hours, getting that deep sleep out of the way. And then you are waking up and cycling through your senses in a specific way. So it's also similar to the mild in that it's a dream initiated and not a wake initiated approach, although people use it different ways. But
yes, they do.
From what I understand, the way it's used, or the way it's taught originally, is a dream initiated approach. So this is kind of where I messed up originally myself. Is I figured it was a wild approach where I was trying to like keep myself up. It's like, yeah, exactly. And of course, whenever I'm like doing those type of mental techniques, and this is where I went wrong with the mild originally too, is I'll keep myself up doing it, right? I'll just stay awake with the counting technique or the perspective memory and visualization stuff. So it's important to see this as to see this as a dream initiated, where you just do the practice and you fall asleep. So the practice, from what I understand, is 4 fast cycles and then 6 slow cycles, cycling through 3 specific senses: your sight, your sound, and your body feeling.
Yep.
So for 2 to 3 seconds, you'll be lying there. And again, this is after 4 to 6 hours or so of sleep. I think technically in the study, it was like 5 or 4.5 hours. I can't remember. And you wake up and you cycle through your sights, eyes closed, for 2 to 3 seconds. What am I seeing? Am I seeing anything? It's okay if you're not seeing anything. And then you cycle to your sound. What am I hearing? Am I hearing anything? 2 to 3 seconds again. And then to your body. What am I feeling? Does my body feel light? Does it feel heavy? Anything? 2 to 3 seconds, and then back to the sight. So you do that for 4 times, 4 fast cycles, right? 2 to 3 seconds each. And then you slow it down. So 20 to 30 seconds or so. And what's important here is not to be obsessed about the seconds, the amount of seconds. Don't count the seconds.
But
count the cycles
of it,
but don't count the seconds.
Yes, yeah. I've heard that too.
Yeah. And so that seems to work best for me, because any numerical stuff, it kind of really wakes me up. It really gets my mind more alert and awake. So being less obsessed with the numbers is probably a good thing in terms of falling asleep. So 4 fast cycles, 6 slower cycles of 20 to 30 seconds a piece. And then after that, just fall asleep. Just turn over and try and fall asleep as fast as you can. And that's it. And that's what I really like about it, is it's so easy and, just applicable in many different ways for a lot of different people. What I found is the way it gets me lucid is I will catch myself doing that cycle thing in the dream. And what I'll usually catch is my body feeling. It'll be lighter than usual. And so I recognize that as, a dream sign. So
someone here who we call omni-lucid, by the way, because he's basically able to be lucid in all of his dreams. He developed his own method based on his own body feeling, and it was gravity for him. It took him about, was it 8 years to do that? He dealt with nightmares, and he had to kind of overcome that. He kind of basically fought the good fight to basically get to a point where he could actually notice he was dreaming, and he got to the point where he's basically doing it all the time. But anyway, one comparison I will make in terms of SLD is like we kind of call it esoteric in a sense, like because people can use it for dialeds and wilds. It depends on just what you're using for. Are you using it for what the technique is meant to be used for, or are you trying to use that feeling as a wild anchor? But then there's also like I compare it to mild a little differently because SSILD to me kind of feels more like an awareness technique. It's more about having a heightened level of awareness as you fall asleep in a sense, like you're prepping yourself to be more aware of the dream.
Whereas
definitely.
More mindfulness.
It's about perspective memory and about triggering an intention. And so there's
I agree.
There's differing methodology there. It may work similarly in terms of like effectiveness, but the methodology is different. So I just want to make sure you don't confuse people with thinking that.
I agree completely there. The mechanisms of action are completely different. I would say for the mild, it's like the senses. I agree. It's more about like mindfulness and awareness, heightened mindfulness and awareness. But with the mild, the way I see it, the triggers that are in play there are perspective memory is the big one, and then visualization is another one that kind of helps solidify the perspective memory. But then also, if you're doing the waking practices, the way I think about it nowadays is there's some placebo involved there. Because if you're doing waking, and this is the way I think about it, if you're doing waking perspective memory exercises and successfully fulfilling them, right? Like, and that's an important point. If you're successfully fulfilling the intentions, next time I see myself in the mirror, I'll do a reality check, so to speak, and you do it, then you have that feeling that it gains a little confidence in yourself, right? So if you do that 5 to 10 times a day, and then you actually say that similar language to yourself at night, next time I see so-and-so in my dream, then I will realize I'm dreaming, then you're going to have a lot more confidence in yourself when you actually say that statement versus kind of just saying the statement and not believing yourself, which is what I did for a long time. Like I'd say it, but I wouldn't really believe it. So I think there's
another element
of that.
There's actually another element to mild that I've recognized too, and that's criticality. Because when you're doing it, one of the other things you're doing is you're teaching yourself to you're training yourself to notice something that is out of place. There are people, like a lot of times when I talk to people about dream signs, they don't know what to look for. And so they have to be taught what to look for. And one of the things that mild helps with is it helps you find those in your dreams. It helps you be more critical and actually find those things. You're looking for them actively. And so that's another element. Then the other thing in terms of perspective memory, I define kind of an intention as a decision or a present decision to perform a future action associated with a trigger. It's meant to be triggered to remind you to do it. For example, join StreamYard at 1:45 p.m. Keep track of the time. It's 1:45. Join StreamYard. Exactly. And the more important, and the other thing that comes up is like the more important an intention is, the more likely you are to remember to do it. If it's not something you care about, then it's going to be easy to forget.
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of us have probably had that, right? Where there was something important that we had to do the next day, like, catch a flight or something like that you just can't miss, or take a test or have a job interview. And so we'll need to wake up at 6, but lo and behold, because it's so important to us, we wake up like 5 minutes before. Exactly.
That happens to me a lot.
And so you might be really good at time-based perspective memory then.
I am actually. I'm good at time in general because last night, for example, when I went to bed, I just guessed what time it was and it was like exactly correct. And when I guessed the time just now, it was 4 minutes off just a little bit ago. So I'm pretty good at time perception in general. Let's see. I think it's probably around 2:32 right now. 2:30.
2:30. Nice. Yeah. Right on.
So my time perception is actually pretty good. The other thing is like the most powerful intention I've ever set, at least in the past few months, aside from all the plane tickets I've bought, because those are very powerful intentions. There was one time where my grandmother was at the house visiting, and I had just completed what I was going to do at work, but I needed to wait until 3:30 to clock out. Well, I left my phone upstairs and went down to talk to her. I had no way to tell time. So every single second I'm down there, I'm thinking I have to clock out at 3:30. It was about like 3:10, I think. And so I very much had that on my mind and was paying very careful attention to what was going on around me because I had to go back upstairs and clock out at 3:30.
Yep.
So the more powerful intention is, um, so the more likely to succeed. But yeah, I'm a big fan of mild. I do it just about basically every day. I love doing it. It's really
That's good.
fun. I love teaching it. It's one of those things I just enjoy doing it. I call myself a mild nut. I really enjoy it. Also, really good sign the internet hasn't cut out and it's raining hard. That's so that the new line seems to be doing its job right now. Knock on
Awesome.
wood.
Yeah.
But so now let's go into the state testing question that we've had. And also, just before we do that, someone was asking if he knows about any research about lucid dreaming technology. And I just put that question up there for you. I would refer him probably to Tech for Dreaming because they actually specifically focus on lucid dreaming technology.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. They would be a great group. I've never like attended any of their events or anything, but I've heard nothing but good things. Another thing you might look into is there's a study done recently. I think it's open access, so anyone can read it. They looked at wearable devices for lucid dreaming, and I'm blanking on the name, but it's something I don't remember the authors, but the title of the study is something like "Are wearable devices effective for lucid dreaming?" So if you were to go to Google Scholar and type that out, you could probably pop up with it. It was done within the last like 5 years or so. And they looked at like, I think 10 different devices or so and how kind of effective they were in general and what their price points were and what their features were and that sort of thing.
One,
There's really only a couple ones out at this point that are even existing that you can buy to begin with. A lot of ones have gone under,
I
and
will add
there's
a
even
note to
few
that.
that are effective.
I'll add a note to this because I actually just watched last week. I watched Tech for Dreaming's June thing, and they actually talked about sleep masks. One of the issues is a lot of the technology is either ineffective due to its usability in terms that it's not comfortable or not easy to use, or because it wasn't designed correctly. There are issues. So the technology is something that is developing. It's not like there yet, but
For
it's in a
sure, yeah,
developing stage.
it's evolving. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
evolving.
and part of that's just a technology issue. Like right now with like the Fitbit or the Aura, I'm wearing an Aura ring myself. There's been research on those, and they're not incredibly accurate. They're
Accurate.
like the study that I looked at, it was like 65-70% accurate compared to a polysomnogram or whatever,
Which is
where they use in
yeah.
actual sleep studies. So,
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of effective enough for now, but in general, in terms of like inducing lucid dreams, that's really not a great efficacy. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all about just the technology and how it evolves. So we'll have to wait on that one a little bit.
We actually have a pretty hot topic here, like what involves dream control here. Just Philip, he's someone I actually taught back in what was it, December 2020. He's been around for a while. What would you pin down to be the main thing for dream control? I see a lot of mixed ideas about it. What do you think?
I'll let you go first, Ron. What do you think?
Well, I think the way I define expectations is different from the APA, so I'll let you give that definition in a bit. But I usually say
God, I don't have that memorized.
It's a combination of your strongest associations and emotions in a given moment. So what you're most associating with what's going on around you, what you're doing, what you're most strongly associate that, whether that's conscious or subconscious, and your emotional state, what your emotions are in that moment. Are you like confident, calm, doubting yourself, excited, nervous, anxious, etc. And I think some of the emotions like anxiety or self-doubt, things like that, they tend to cause paradoxical intention. So they cause the opposite, or you just fail at whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. And I agree with all that. The main thing I would say is, in my experience, and it seems like that of others, is expectation. Not that that's the end all be all, because there is plenty of times where I didn't expect things to work, but I just kind of wished them, I willed them, desired them, had the intention for them, and they do work.
But did you associate them with working? And
well, one I had recently, I didn't expect it to work. I was trying. I'd never ridden a dragon before, So I tried to summon a dragon, and it was very much in the realm of I didn't expect it to work.
Interesting.
But I did the visual trick where you kind of, it's not in front of you, but you look away like it's behind you or around the corner.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah, right.
I can just reach right in front of me and pick something up off a table because
I bet, dude. Yeah. So I look behind me, and lo and behold, there's not just one dragon, there's 3 dragons. You know, that was way beyond my realm of expectation. I didn't expect 3 to be there. So
well, they say there be dragons.
But in general, in general, I'd say expectation is a big factor. And the emotional state plays into that, right?
Yeah.
Because like Ryan was saying, it kind of affects the associations.
I kind of say it affects the mood or theme of the experience, and it affects which associations are stronger at a certain time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. So expectation. What I like to say is dream control is really more about self-control. It's about thought control, right? Yeah. You're trying to learn how to control your own thoughts and feelings. And that's really where you can essentially do a lot of things that you want to do. Of course, full control isn't possible, and no one would actually really want that. I think it's the fun element is the surprise factor, right? If you could fully control everything, then it wouldn't be fun, you know.
Well,
but
I do have a Battle of 5 Armies Star Wars Star Trek lore scenario I want to enact in the Star Wars galaxy with my PR, but I haven't gotten that far yet.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
Because I could totally nerd out on lore and things, so I want to take that to the next level with all of that data that I have. I also want to test out my telepathic interface. I haven't done that yet for Starship piloting. So that's where I want to go. But yeah, let's get into state testing now. We're gonna maybe one last question, then we're getting to state testing. Then I'm gonna ignore questions for a bit. Someone who has trouble getting distracted by thoughts with SSILD, do you have any advice for them?
To get rid of the distraction. Yeah, that's interesting. So I would say in general, the fact if you're getting distracted by thoughts and your mind is wandering, and that means part of sleeping and falling asleep is mind wandering, right? Like actually really letting it wander into some crazy areas. So the fact that your mind is wandering, first of all, isn't a bad thing. You know, it means that you'll fall asleep faster. And if I remember right, I'm not sure if they did it with the SSILD, but I know with the mild, Denholm found that if you can fall asleep quick, like 5 to 10 minutes after doing the technique, then it's twice as effective. And I would say the same thing for SSILD. It seems to be more effective for me personally if I can fall asleep quick. So if you find yourself kind of drifting and being distracted and falling asleep in the middle of it, not such a bad thing. Let yourself fall asleep. You might actually still have that heightened awareness and mindfulness while doing it. But in order to like take care of the distractions, there's a couple different things you can do. Meditation is a great thing, but specifically mindfulness meditation. Trying to increase your overall what they call trait mindfulness. So if you're going into a meditative state regularly, mindfulness state regularly, then over time, and what I found is personally, it takes about a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice, 15, 20 minutes a day. And I'll feel a shift where it's what they call in psychology, it's state versus trait. So instead of being in a state of mindfulness, it's more developed into a personality trait. And then that will help with just distractions in general. So I'd say those couple things.
All right, well, let's get into the state test discussion for a little bit. And then I'd like to talk about what you think is the most like cutting edge, or what do you think is the next step in dream researching. But let's go into that state test discussion.
Sure.
And what your thoughts are on, because my thoughts on state tests, I usually don't recommend state tests to people in general. And they tend to be a crutch. I usually see them as kind of a crutch. I try to teach people more about noticing things that are out of place and using that to notice that they are dreaming, and try to recognize especially the really obvious things like physics not working, or things doing things that they physically are incapable of doing, being in places you have no idea how you got there, you have no reason to be there. Things like that. Like, I try to teach people to recognize dream signs, and then to develop this association between noticing a dream sign and noticing that you are dreaming. It's usually how I try to teach people. Very much a mild approach. It's what I tend to go for.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. I think there's room for everything, because I feel like you're a very unique individual, Ryan. So you are highly critical, highly logical. So I think that works well for you. But for a lot of people, and I would say myself included, more at the beginning part of my journey, there was a lot of instances of what, like, some people refer to as pre-lucidity, where you're in that questioning state, right? Am I dreaming? Am I not? And I realized that you teach more the criticality factor of just trying to observe the overall environment, the scenario you're in order to realize whether or not you are dreaming. But for me, what I found effective is the state test, because they're a quick, easy solution to figure out whether I'm, in a dream or awake. Specifically the reliable ones, though, because there's plenty of terrible state tests. Let's get that right?
Yes,
The
I
finger
read
through
that
the palm
page already.
thing, no, that's terrible. Don't do that. The finger through the palm, because that's dream control, right? That evolves around expectation, and most of
And
us
Dr.
aren't
Lamarca
expecting
discussed
to be
this too,
awake.
that most state tests, I read her book actually before I went to the conference, that most state tests are dream control. And that's why that they're really not
Exactly. Yeah,
reliable.
that's the problem with them. Yeah.
Even the reliable
Yeah.
ones are dream control to an extent. They're just dream control based on different things.
Yeah,
Like
for
the
sure.
rereading
Like,
state test, the most recommended one, you are trying to an extent force something to change, or you do something to a point where it changes. That is in effect dream control, because you can do the opposite.
yeah,
You can take a specific data set if you memorize it and make it be consistent. I've done that before.
100%, definitely. And I've had several clients who the rereading one doesn't work well for them, because they seem to be able to read in lucid dreams very well, which is not a personal thing. But again, that's why I like the one-on-one. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say there's flaws in everything, right? And there's no 100% guaranteed technique. Like, I had a psychiatrist ask me this once. We were having dinner, and he was like, okay, he was interested in lucid dreaming. And he was like, is there, and I'll pose this to you, Ryan, is there any way that you can prove 100% right now that this isn't a dream? Right now?
Right now, let's see.
Is there any way you can prove it?
I know the
100%.
logical answer, because I took a philosophy class actually back in when we discussed certain things. And one of the things that was discussed was idealism, like the thought that physical reality doesn't exist. Like, how do you actually prove physical reality?
Yeah.
There is
For
a
sure.
level of external consistency. I do think that you can plot things that are happening over time and determine that that this is a different level of reality to our dreams. This is a different level of reality.
Yep.
You can call it what you want. You can call it waking. You can call it the dream of some divine being. You can call it whatever you want, but there's a different level to reality. Actions have consequences. There are externalities to what you do. There are effects that last, regardless of what you want them to be, or even what you would most expect them to be. Surprise is both prevalent and obviously available. Your subconscious does not influence as much. There's still an influence, because it influences your perception. How you perceive things can drastically change what you think is going to happen. But that's your perception of reality versus the experience of it, which is similar in extent, but there are externalities. So you can say, am I dreaming? Well, am I dreaming? I don't think so. Could I be in a dream? That's a completely different question. But I can observe this world around me and go, there are things here that are extraordinarily consistent, that I cannot manipulate, that I cannot control, that are well outside of my control, and that those things are there regardless of what I try to do to change them. And I can observe that and compare that to my dreams and go, yes, this reality is measurably different.
That's true, but it's not 100% foolproof, right?
100%.
Because there is still stability in lucid dreams. Like we talked about, persistent realm type stuff. and there's still things that you can't control, even in lucid dreams, right? So you can't. It's
I would
it's a
say, like,
factor.
in terms of things you can't control in lucid dreams, I kind of have a philosophy of, like, you can't control everything, but you can choose what things you control. Like, you can choose which things you control at the expense of others, but you can't control everything at once.
Oh, for
But,
sure.
like,
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
possible. I mean, there's too many details to control, right? Like I'm sitting in this room right now, and I'm not even thinking about the paint color or the
no.
flooring or anything like that. It's
Meanwhile,
literally
I'm
too much
observing my
information for
hands
our
touching
brain.
each other, my feet on the floor, the thunderstorm
Yeah,
that just passed overhead, the
exactly.
light coming through the
Yeah,
window. And
yeah.
again, as soon as you said there were so many details, to me that's a challenge. To me, that's a
Yeah, sure.
challenge
Sure, go
to see
for
how
it.
many details I can actually control in a dream. Now I have a new dream goal.
Yeah. Well, and there's an inherent. I would love to hear more about that. There's an inherent limitation of our minds, though, right? There's
Hmm.
only so much we can process at any given
Yes.
time. Like for cognitive psychology, they kind of break it down memory into short-term memory, working memory, and long-term memory in
Hmm.
general, right? So with the working memory, which is kind of what we're all using right now, what they found in general is about 7 to 9 chunks of information that can be stored. And you have to keep working with that in order for it to encode into long-term memory.
Hmm.
But you can't process a whole bunch of information at once. You can only process, for most of us,
And you have to be
a
selective about
limited
what you
amount.
process.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
You know what the
exactly
cool
right.
thing is about dreaming, though, with this context? In a dream, if you're not actively paying attention to something, it can easily be said that the thing does not exist. If you're not actively paying
You
attention
gonna
to
get
or aware of
philosophical
something.
on us?
Not just
If a tree
philosophical.
falls in the forest and no one hears
No,
it?
but I think it's true in a way. In a dream, you see your hallway when you open your bedroom door because you expect to, but before you open that bedroom door, that hallway didn't exist because you weren't dreaming
Oh
about it
yeah.
yet.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
so
I
things
agree.
you
That
ignore,
argument takes on a whole nother
things you
meaning.
ignore do not actively exist. So in fact,
Yep.
your dream consists of all the things that you're able to pay attention to in a given moment.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, I agree
Hmm.
with you. It takes on a whole new meaning in the dream
Yeah.
realm, for sure.
Hmm.
For sure.
I can definitely get philosophical to an extent.
Well,
Mhm.
it's good. I mean, honestly, do you know what PhDs stand for? They
Doctorate in
stand for
philosophy. Doctor of
Yeah,
philosophy.
boom, you got it, man. So we're all philosophizers, honestly.
Hmm.
It's really even doctorate level. I mean, MDs are a little bit different. They're like, again, one of the biggest fields, so they're practicing in a different way. But a lot of PhDs, especially on the research side, it's all about philosophizing, and we all have our own different viewpoints, and they're constantly evolving. We're only human, so
Hmm.
yeah, we're all philosophizers in our own way.
Proselytizers
Philosophizers.
to an extent, I guess.
Oh my God, philosophers. Jesus.
Oh yes.
Uh, okay, so one thing I wanted to bring up was
Hmm.
you had mentioned like how do people get involved in research, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Uh, Especially like outside of academia.
Yes, I
So
definitely wanted to bring that up. Like, what caused you to actually split from academia in the first place, as well?
yeah, well, it's not a complete split, but one of the things that kind of, let's say, left a bad taste in my mouth about academia was the the pricing, the exorbitant
Hmm.
pricing for the education I received. I felt like they just did not match. So I didn't want to burden anyone else with that kind of debt just to learn like a free skill like lucid dreaming, right?
Hmm.
So one of the ways, instead of like going to a university to teach a class on it, I would much rather start a nonprofit
Hmm.
and work through that way. Because nonprofits, there are certain purposes you can form nonprofits for,
Hmm.
and education and science are two of the purposes. So it fits right in that realm. So I figured it's high time that Lucid Dreaming has a nonprofit dedicated for itself. So yeah, I started one recently. Well, I should say I've applied for nonprofit status. We haven't been granted by the IRS yet.
Your website makes that clear at the bottom.
Yeah.
But you have to read the bottom
legal
to
purposes,
get there.
right? I don't want to. Yeah. But yeah, we should be hearing back hopefully within the next like 4 months or so at the latest, which it probably will take that long because IRS likes to take their time, but in a good way. We don't want to be granting nonprofit status for people who don't deserve it. So yeah, that's one way to do research outside of academia is through a nonprofit. Because nonprofits are obviously going to look better on paper in the sense of grants. If you want to do research, it's going to take money, right? If you want to do it seriously and you want to do big projects and get a lot done, it's going to take money. And that's for many different purposes, through going through the institutional review board process, which can be very expensive outside of academia. Inside of academia, it's pretty much free. You just have to wait for a few weeks while the process happens, give or take. But outside of academia, you need to, depending on the type of research you do, you need to, or you should, I should say, go through an institutional review board, as they call it in our country, in the United States.
IRBs,
yep, IRBs.
And you have to, for a lot of research, depending on what research you're doing, you kind of have to for a lot if you want to get published. That's one thing you told me at the conference.
For sure. Yep, exactly. Yeah, if you want to get published in a peer-reviewed journal, which is part of the scientific process, right? You can do research on your own and then just publish it on your website, but that's a little bit different than science, because with science, an important part of the process is peer review. You have people at kind of that same level that are reviewing your work and making it better, right? So in order to get published in a lot of peer-reviewed journals, if you're doing human research or just research on animals, but specifically humans, then you will need to go through an institutional review board process. And this is all to basically okay the ethics behind it. Or are you treating the humans or animals ethically in what you want to study? Because scientists are very curious.
I know.
And in the past, curiosity has gotten in the way of ethics.
It's done more than kill the cat. I know that much.
Definitely done more than kill the cat.
A lot of bad examples throughout history. I won't go into them here because let's just say they've been trodden out enough. But there are plenty of examples throughout history. Just look at famous world events through history. You can find some examples.
Exactly. Even in this country 50, 60 years ago, there was some obscene studies done where, I'm not even exaggerating, people died in the sake of science.
You were at the Church Commission this is something I used to study intelligence back at my other university, and something that came up as a CA. I think it was MK Ultra.
So
yes.
Yep. Yeah. So with, if I'm not mistaken, with research, the important document, I think, is the Declaration of Helsinki. I might be wrong on that, but essentially a bunch of scientists came together after these terrible studies and were like, okay, we need to set some standards. People can't just die in the name of science. We need to treat humans and animals ethically, even though we're trying to advance knowledge, right? So that is the whole institutional review board process bit, is to make sure that you are actually treating humans and animals ethically before you go ahead and do the research. But that involves jumping through a bunch of hoops and getting the okay. So, and that takes money, it takes time.
Big issues with the research in general. And honestly, I think it might be good to see some shifts in this practice, because research is prohibitively expensive. So, and it's hard to do outside of a major institution. So in terms of like IRB process, what are they doing that is worth thousands of dollars? Like, what exactly are they doing?
Good question, Ryan. I don't know, man. I think it's pretty
Mhm.
expensive. But all joking aside, they have professionals on the
Yes.
board, right?
Mhm.
Highly educated professionals who are spending their time combing through all the details of your proposed study to make sure it's ethically okay, you know.
Mhm.
So in all honesty, yeah, it's expensive and prohibitively so for many lay persons, but it's probably not a bad thing. I think we should err on the side of ethics
Mhm.
in this case, right? Versus like
Yeah.
trying to do research cheaper, essentially.
Mhm.
But there's you don't always need an IRB. I should say that. Like it depends on what research you're doing. Like one research study I'm about to do or am working on is one on sleep paralysis, where we're going to be scraping all the data from like the subreddit of sleep paralysis and using that. So in that sense,
I
there's
wish
no
you
human
luck.
subjects involved, right?
I wish
What's
you
that?
luck with that because I know some of those Reddits can be pretty interesting places.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
I
for
wish you
sure.
luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, the
Mhm.
hard part is the coding part, the programming for me. I've
Yeah.
never done any of that. But yeah, so in that instance, there are no human subjects involved or animals. So you actually don't need institutional review board approval in order to do it and then publish it, right?
Mhm.
So that's something really anyone could do. And you could still get published in peer reviewed journals. So that's one option. Another option is to get involved in research is just being a participant, which
Yeah.
I'll put a plug in for my nonprofit here. I have a form that you can fill out on the website under the research tab
Yes.
where it's
Go
how to
down to
get
the heading
involved.
that says,
And
getting involved and then being a participant. There's a form there, you can fill it out.
yeah,
I filled it out
yeah,
myself,
exactly.
so I have firsthand experience with
I
that.
I saw that. I
Yep.
appreciate that, Ryan. Yeah. Yeah, so the more people we can get involved that way, the better, because it just makes us an easier time for us researchers to reach out to the people who actually want to participate when the time comes when we have research that we want to do.
Mhm.
So that's one way. Another way is, have you ever heard of experiment.com? I think it's .com.
No,
Might
I
be
have not.
.org.
I
It's
have
like
not.
Kickstarter for science, essentially. It's a cool idea.
It
So
is a cool idea.
basically, if you need funding for research that you want to get done, for IRB stuff, for publishing fees, which is a whole nother monster,
Yeah.
paying
Now
money to
that's something that
publish
could
your
be
research.
changed, I think.
Oh
But
God, don't get me started, Ryan. Don't get me started on that
we
rabbit
had
hole.
we had that conversation a few weeks ago. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
need to have that again.
that's a whole
Uh,
problem.
yes.
But yeah, if you wanted a little bit of funds, or even if your project's bigger, you can post it on experiment.com. I'm pretty sure it's .com, and it's people might fund it. It's and you don't have to be affiliated with any institution to do that. They used to have it. I've been keeping an eye on the site for many years. It was about like 7 years ago or so. It was only restricted to people at institutions, but now it's open to anyone.
It
So
is
it's straight up
experiment.com. I
like
just checked.
Kickstarter. Yep.
It's
Perfect.
experiment.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another angle. I've never used it personally, but I think it's such a cool idea, to get more people involved in the scientific process, because you don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to have an academic education in order to be involved in the scientific process.
I would
There's a
thoroughly
lot of
enjoy
great
getting involved
scientists.
in some of that. So, because I want to get involved in, specifics. Like I would love to get involved in a specific specialization. I consider myself, when
Mhm.
it comes to lucid dreaming, highly specialized. Most people who
Yeah,
study lucid dreaming have psychology degrees. So you learn a lot of different
yeah,
things. Well, I consider
hmm
myself highly knowledgeable on one very specific subject. I want to be highly specialized. I'd like to be able to understand as much as I can about lucid dreaming and then use my analytical capabilities to apply that knowledge and come up with interesting ideas. Um,
for sure.
and on that note, I want to know what your thoughts are on current research that is being done. What do you think is like the most interesting research that is currently being done on lucid dreaming right now that you're aware of?
Oh man, current research being done. Most interesting. Well, I think some of the most applicable, in my personal opinion, is like healing stuff. I think there's a lot of room for growth in that department. The technology stuff's cool, in order to make lucid dreaming more accessible, right?
Yes,
And that's
that
actually another interesting uh, arm of research in the lucid dreaming field is people like uh, Karen Conkley and Remington Mallet, who are bringing
mhm,
people into the lab and inducing lucid dreams in them. Michelle Carr,
yep.
and people off the street, you don't have to have lucid dreaming experience, right? Because I'm sure Ryan, as the stats show, it's about 50% of the people, right? 50%
50%.
of
I know.
people
I've
in dream.
actually been telling people that lately. That in with the cueing that they do, visual auditory stimulus that's getting incorporated into dreams, that's about
Yep.
50% success rate. Of course, you have to do it right. You
No,
have to
it's
practice
higher than that. I was meaning
or
fifty
more.
percent of people in general have had one lucid dream in
Oh,
their
oh,
life.
that 50% in
You know,
general. Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah. 50% in general have had one lucid dream in their life, and I think you said there's another 20% that have them frequently, or is it
yeah, and
20%?
frequently is
Yeah.
like once a month in
Not
terms of
not for
like how
us.
most
Frequently here is
researchers.
like once a week or more.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Which
and
I
also
think
bearing in
in
mind, and this
science
actually
that's
goes
cool.
out to something you said. Sorry, I just wanted to bring this up
Yeah, yeah, go
because
ahead.
one thing that was mentioned, I think it was on your site or someone else's, is that in terms of teenagers, that more teenagers, who especially I guess for practicing lucid dreaming, get them more frequently. Now,
Mhm.
our sort of um, population here is about 90+% people under 18. And what
Mhm.
we have noticed is people who actually start learning lucid dreaming are able to get them pretty frequently. Some of them aren't. There are
Mhm.
plenty that are not, but there are plenty of people who are able to get. I think they said on one of their servers, 100 people who are able to get them like at least once a week or more.
That's
I
great.
mean, we're
Yeah, that's really
and
exciting.
on a server on the server that was mentioned, that server has I think less than 600 people, so that's a pretty sizable chunk of that population. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's mostly younger people because what's happening here, and this is with Dream Cafe in general, people are coming to us specifically from the YouTube, so we have to kind of basically retrain them when they come. But
Mhm.
but that's where
Yep.
the pipeline is coming from. That's one of the reasons I have this channel in the first place is because I'm out there looking at a couple of particular popular videos. I monitor them about once a week, and I just go into comments, look for anyone who's possibly interested, and try to give them pointers or give them resources
Nice.
they can
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at. I've
Mhm.
recommended your site. I recommend Dr. Lamarca's
Oh,
site
thanks.
because she's got some good stuff.
Yep.
I
She got great
recommend
stuff.
Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. I recommend a few different resources, and then um, about most of the time, either someone doesn't reply or they'll reply they're interested in it or they'll have some questions, and then I'll try to answer questions. I got one reply from some guy last week who was set in his ways, and that was unfortunate. But what does he know? He
It
hasn't
happens.
actually studied it, but
Oh my
um,
God, Ryan.
well, yeah. I mean, he actually said in a comment that most people are going to get lucid dreams and they're only going to last a minute.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah.
actually
That's
said that,
definitely
and
a personal belief thing.
it is a
Yeah.
personal thing, and he passed it off as fact, and he's going like,
Yeah.
and then I quoted, the certain sites and specifically yours with like all the research on it and stuff, and he said like, well all those are wrong, and I'm like, oh, nice, like
Okay. Yeah, sure.
excellent.
Yeah. People will believe what they want, right?
You won't refute a
So,
single thing I said, but you'll say
yeah.
everything is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
People like that, but most people I'd say well over 90% are better than that. I've come across maybe 3 people in comments who have been jerks, and I can deal with those. But the others are decent.
You'll always have
Um,
those. Yeah.
yes, you'll
Oh
always
God.
have those, but they're
Yeah.
usually funny. I mean, don't argue with the guy who will write 700 words in a reply.
I've seen you do it. I've
Yes.
seen you do it. So,
Yes, you have.
yeah.
It's pretty funny. Yes, because I shared that thread to you. So yes, you have seen me do it. But that wasn't even like an argument per se. That was more of a discussion for the most part. But no, like like I've gotten into let's just say a little bit more heated discussions a couple of times.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
anyway, that's neither here or there a little bit. But I actually have another thought for you because I've kind of bounced this idea off a couple people, and there are I think pros and cons to this concept. But do you know if any research has ever been done on in doing any type of, lab style studies, but doing them remotely with modern technology? Do you know if any research has been done? I can think of several pros and cons as to why it could be beneficial or why it may not be, workable. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. So I kind of think about it this way. So if you're bringing someone into a laboratory, it really depends on where you're bringing them in from. Are you bringing them from the same area? Or are you bringing them from somewhere else? Is there a time zone difference? Is their sleep schedule going to be altered because they're in a different location? So you may not be able to observe the normal sleep patterns. Also, sleeping in a different location tends to have effects on your sleep, especially somewhere unfamiliar. So there are pros, I think, to being able to do something in someone's own home. You're in a familiar environment. Yes, you're going to be wearing things and doing things differently, but you're in a familiar environment. You'll be able to adhere to your traditional sleeping patterns a little bit more accurately. But the question then becomes controls and variables. What equipment is being used? Is it the same equipment?
Exactly.
Computers? I think you can control for a couple things. Like you would have to send someone a computer to use, like a laptop, as well as the equipment, teach them how to use it, video with them, kind of like they do with telehealth, like where they monitor people doing things. So you'd have to do something like that. And now I'm wondering what the viability of something like that would do. I'd be very interested in an actual viability study being done, because the other aspect of that is the people who actually doing the research can all work remotely. You could have people collaborating from different areas across the world. And for example, I have a friend in the Netherlands. Let's just say, say for example, someone in Europe was actually doing research on someone in the United States. They wouldn't have to change their sleep schedule to monitor someone's sleep, because someone in the United States would be sleeping and they would be awake.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, there are actual benefit and applications. The question is, and also I've actually come up with an idea of how some of this stuff could actually work out, because that's my brain kind of going for you. I'm thinking, has anyone thought of this before? Am I an idiot? Is this
no, you're not. You're on the forefront, Ryan.
What's going on?
Yeah, that's definitely
has anyone tried to do this before?
Oh man, I'm sure people have. I'm drawing a blank on any specific studies that have been done.
This is something I really want to know. I'd like to run this by maybe Karen or Remy, or a couple other people. I really would like to know, get an answer to this. And if it's not workable, I want to know why. If it hasn't been done yet and someone is interested in doing it, I would love to, take part in that possibly. So there's a lot of cool things out there. And that's just the way my mind is working. Because
for sure,
I just think about, like, what could a group of people without much stuff do with the equipment we have? Obviously, we couldn't get anything published. A group of us have talked about maybe, and I ran this idea past my group. Actual procedure in terms of the way I would actually do this is, I would run an experiment that's been run before, because you have to have a secondary objective. You have to have something that can actually be tested. See if you get the same results that you've gotten with similar studies that have been done, especially ones that have been highly verified. Do it completely remotely. Stress test the equipment. How long can the computer run for? How long can whatever the EEG or the other equipment that you're using, can it run for without dying? What is the actual viability in terms of length, duration, two-way communication? You'd have to be able to communicate with the participant over audio. You'd have to be able to talk
to
them.
Not necessarily.
Or some other way. But if you want to, like, wake them up and then communicate, get results over text or anything like that, there needs to be some form of communication and play. And then you have to be able to have the data streamed. The timestamps would need to be accurately recorded locally, but then it would need to be streamed remotely. There would be a time delay, but you could actually monitor the data as it's being streamed to a server. There's a lot of things that you could test for, but there's like a lot of stress testing you could do. I think the primary limitations are, certain things like, someone's internet, the computer that's being used. Some of those can be controlled for, some of them can't. And then the fact that you can't do certain things, like if you need physical access to do something, like if you need tactile access or physical access to do something, you can't do that. But there are, I think, a lot of things that could be done remotely in the age of remote technology. I just think that there could be a way that you could make some of this more widely possible. In a sense, with technology, I would love to see. I want to run this by Tech for Dreaming next on the 17th. I want to ask some of them about it, but I really want to run this by some people, maybe see what people think about it.
Yeah, I would say your biggest restrictions aren't necessarily the ones you listed. The way I see it is more as like the biggest restrictions are technological innovation and cost. So just like we were talking about all the sleep mask and Oura rings and that sort of thing, like they're accurate to a certain degree, but
I wouldn't talk about using that. I would talk about using more accurate equipment, like, Dash, which I think uses more EEG and stuff. That costs a certain amount, but it depends on, I guess, how much of it you buy. Like, are you buying just a couple of sets of it,
Right.
or are you buying like 30? Also, I
Yeah.
would trim down things. I would have cues be manual, and I would, you would have someone manually cue people to get them lucid. Also, I would primarily choose to use audio cues because it eliminates either having extra equipment or extra programming that's required, and it kind of slims that down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
So
that's sort of the approach I would personally do. Like, I actually thought about some of that. Some of those exact limitations I actually did think about.
yeah,
To an
yeah.
extent.
Well, and this is all part of the research process, right? It's
Mhm.
trying to iron out every single little detail.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just like you described, the way I see it is technology. There's a lot of technological
Mhm.
limitations, not necessarily providing people with laptops or,
Yeah.
computers, but maybe finding people that already have that technology and then
Finding people
sending
who
them
have that.
the
Yeah.
technology that you want them to use. Like,
Mhm.
for example, from what I've seen, is the ZMAX uh, headband eye mask thing that seems to be pretty accurate in terms of comparatively to polysomnographs and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
So it's expensive, right? I
Yeah.
think it's
How
like
much?
$900,000 or something like that. So
Well, the thing
you
you can
can't
also
necessarily
consider.
buy 30 of those.
No, but you could buy 5 of them,
You
and
could,
you could
yeah. I
share them
mean,
with different
especially
people.
if you have that money to spare.
But if you but also you can think about it too in terms of what are the variety of different costs associated. So there are short-term and long-term costs. Also,
Mhm.
if you're bringing
Yep.
people because in a lab you can either bring people off the street in your local area, in which case you're limited to just the people in your local area, or you can fly people in from somewhere else, in which case there's transportation involved.
And
Also,
that's going to be very expensive, right?
if people want to collaborate from different countries, they either have to be on calls with each other or they have to be in the same location. If people want to be physically involved together, they'd have to be at the same location. So there are some limitations there. So I think there are pros and cons to both approaches. I also think there are costs to both approaches, and then there
Yeah.
are what you would also want to look for is long-term sustainability. Okay, like how long can this equipment be expected to last? If you're making say a $5,000 investment in
Yeah.
some
Mhm.
like high quality equipment, how long can you expect that equipment to last? Can it be
Yeah.
reliably shipped to and from people? What would need to be that procedure to be done to protect the equipment? Can it
Yeah.
still read accurately when it's shipped? How long will the equipment last? What will that investment get you in terms of time? I think that would be a long-term study, honestly, to determine, how long that equipment would be able to last. In terms of the
Oh, that'd
actual
definitely be long
viability, I
term.
think,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I think the
exactly.
viability can be done reasonably enough, but then you would want the long-term effects and logistics. And logistics is something I think about. Like, for example, say you wanted to work with somebody in another country, and you can either ship them something, or you could fly them to where you are, or you're working on an online community like this one. You have people from all over the world, and you want to use that as kind of a sample or as a database to get participants from. I mean, it opens up a lot of things. So you kind of think about it that way too. Would it cost more or less to work with them remotely or to bring them in person somewhere? Is another
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. And that's research, right? Is like
Yeah.
ironing out the details because there's always pros and cons. There's
Hmm.
no study that's ever perfect.
Yes.
And it's all a matter of like sacrificing one thing for the other pretty much.
One thing, so one
So,
person, yeah, because one person on our group, I just want to bring this up because one person mentioned she's actually a scientist, and she's
Mhm.
biologist, she does biology
Cool.
stuff, I believe, or it's either biology or chemistry, I forget which one, but she does actual like scientific studies, and she gets paid a ton of
Awesome.
money.
Yeah,
But she
awesome.
mentioned controlled setting. Being in the laboratory
Mhm.
is a controlled setting, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, okay, well, how many of these variables can be controlled for that from the home environment? How many of those can actually be controlled for? Which ones cannot? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a serious question to actually think about. So I would be very interested in
Yeah.
running all of this by like Karen, by Remy, I still haven't gotten in touch with Karen yet. I think Dash just sent her my info, but I don't know how to actually get in touch with her yet. But I'll have to
Yeah.
figure out. I'll run this by Remy first, probably. I want to see if I can schedule time to talk to him and run this by him and see what his thoughts are.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and again, there's always pros and cons, and then there's always things you're sacrificing for the other.
yes, there
So
is.
with bringing people into the lab,
Hmm.
yeah, you can control other variables more,
Hmm.
but then that's not really indicative of the natural environment, right?
Exactly.
So it's in some ways it's better, maybe if you're like trying to induce a lucid dream strictly in them, like that's your main objective, or like
Hmm.
trying to do a two-way communication or something. But there's a lot of people who struggle to get asleep in the lab, especially with everything
Yes.
hooked up to them. So being at a home environment where you're more familiar with your surroundings, you're gonna have strengths that way. So yeah, it's all a matter of analysis and specifically what your priorities for that
Yeah.
specific research study.
And it
Because
depends, like I said, like I think there is a lot that can be done. It really depends on what you want to monitor. Or do you want to monitor someone physically while they sleep? In that
yeah,
case, you would need like recording equipment. You need cameras or something like that. If you want to monitor them visually or physically, that might be more
yeah,
difficult. If you want to engage in, like, I think Karen she talked something about possibly wanting to do like tactile feedback. And I do hope, if she does that, I do hope to maybe possibly get involved in that. That'd be really cool. But that requires physical contact. So that would obviously be a limitation. But if you want to study, for example, like effects on, you say you come with a different effect like communication, or you want to study someone's actual like sleep patterns, or maybe how lucid dreaming might affect their actual sleep. There are a variety of things I think you could study remotely if they don't require physical contact. All you need to have is
oh yeah,
communication.
a whole bunch of things.
There is
Yeah,
a variety of
yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, you could probably study a lot more out of the lab than you could in, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's the exciting
But
part,
I do think
especially
it
as
would
the
be interesting to
technology
see.
evolves.
I'd be interesting to see who else has had this idea, because I'm not arrogant enough to think I'm the only person who's thought of this. And so I know someone has thought about this somewhere, and someone who's
Oh
probably got more money and resources
yeah,
has thought about this.
yeah.
And I want
Well,
to
we
get
were
other
actually
people's
talking about it
opinion
at the
on it.
conference, a bunch
Yeah.
of researchers, in
hmm
the sense of just like you were saying, where in one country we could have people falling asleep, and then like in Europe or Australia or somewhere where
hmm
when they're awake, then you could have those researchers over there monitoring and sending
hmm
signals and that sort of thing. So
Guys, yeah, the guy
there's
I
people
talked about
doing
from the
it for
Netherlands,
sure.
he's actually, I think he's watching the stream right now, because it is, let's see here. It is like, let's see, it's 9:17 p.m. over there. It's 21:17 in the Netherlands. So he's watching this, I believe. A couple people I talked to Pacific time watching this, people from different time zones. So that's one of the reasons I do it at this time, because time zones are a thing. But yes, it really, like,
Oh, yes.
working between Europe and the United States, you don't have to adjust your sleep schedule to research. That is a big bonus if you're doing
Mhm.
research internationally remotely.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
don't have to be
And with
awake at
more
4 in the morning.
technological innovation, it's
Mhm.
really going to open things up in that regard. So
Like
I'm
like if
excited for the
yeah.
future.
Like if I wanted to be awake there and my friends wake back to bed, I would be awake at 11 p.m. All right, that's normal for me.
Yep.
6-hour time difference. It's a pretty powerful
Yep.
thing. So yeah, and if
Yeah.
you're in the Pacific, I mean, it's even earlier. So there's a lot of variability that can go to that. But yeah, I want to run this by people who've maybe thought about doing research like this before, and see, is anyone considered doing a serious study on it? Because if so, I'd love to be involved with it, because I think it'd be cool as heck. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think if I remember right, Martin Dressler was kind of like really looking into that because he had
Martin
gotten a
Dressler.
bunch of
He's
different
in Europe. I talked.
masks and stuff.
I gave him directions on how to get to Kipper Ballroom A at the conference, because it was near the Flying V, and I gave him directions to the Flying V. So yeah, I remember
Yeah.
talking to Dr. Dressler. Very
Yeah.
interesting individual. I don't remember all of his research. I couldn't follow everything. He talked about MRIs on brains and certain types of brain scans. I was able to follow
Mhm.
most of it. There are a few things I wasn't able to follow there, but um, very interesting. I would love to maybe get in touch with some people and just bounce ideas off people and see what sticks, if anything does. And
Yeah.
there's some interesting stuff here. I would love to get more community involvement in research as well, like people who are
Mhm.
actively involved, because there are a lot of curious people here, and I think a lot of us would like to know what's going on. With Some of us might like to actually get involved in doing things. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of curiosity here. I'm definitely an example of that. But a lot of us think about things and just have thought about lucid dreaming for a long time. For most of the other people I'm with, they've thought about it for years, decades in some cases, and they've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
thinking
For
about,
sure.
okay, well, how could we make something that could work for a lot of people? Like people have given serious thought to a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of serious thought outside of mainstream academia, and I do think that tapping into that would be kind of interesting to do in terms of
Yeah.
21st century moving forward from there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We need more people involved in research for sure. There's especially in the lucid dreaming field. There needs to be way more research being done. So
Mhm.
yeah, I welcome anyone who wants
Mhm.
to be involved. Feel free to reach out, and
Yeah.
I'd be happy to direct as needed because
Yeah.
it's a growing field, but it's still small, and
Okay.
we need to learn a lot more before we can help people with it.
And if
in the sense of
and
applying
just
the benefits.
let me know, like, if you have any articles you'd like to share with the community at large or anything you'd like to share, I can get those posted in our Discord servers and actually get those shared to people as well. So let us
Awesome.
know
Thank
if
you.
you have anything you would like to get shared with the community. This is the younger community. I want to also connect and build a bridge between us and, I want to build a bridge between our communities and, people who do research. I want to do that. That's one of the things, was one of my objectives going to the conference, was to kind of be an ambassador for all of us. And another objective was to, kind of learn more about people who are older and any other lucid dreaming communities online and people who are older. I think Robert Wagner has one, so I'm going to have to look into his and see what's going on there. But I'm very interested in that, because all of our experience is dealing with 13 to 17-year-olds for the most part. About 90+% is that. And so there are a lot of factors that go with that. And that's the majority of our communities here online. Now, the internet does trend younger, so we have a lot of younger people online. But it also is we basically are teaching the next generation of lucid dreamers here. That's basically what we do.
Definitely. Yep. On a side note with the IRB processes, studying anyone under 18, there's more
requires probably parental
through.
consent.
I
know enough law from a couple of business law classes and some law stuff that I did, but it would require their consent, parental consent, because anyone under the age of majority, which is 18 in the United States, requires parental consent. Legally, they cannot speak for themselves, so they would require someone else's consent, and you could never get anything like published if you didn't have that. So I'm pretty aware of laws surrounding minors and protection of minors. So dealing with a lot of that. There are a couple of 18+ people here, but dealing with minors in general definitely requires parental consent and other things of that nature.
For ethical reasons, it's a good thing.
It is a good thing, because your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25 anyway, so your ability for rational judgment and for actual reasoning is kind of impaired at a younger age. That's what it's called. That's called being a child. Someone I listen to sometimes, kind of funny, he talks about like children are basically they they just do anything, and they'll if you're not watching your children, they'll just go injure themselves because they don't know better. They don't know what they're doing, and they need people to watch them.
It's all new.
They need people. Everything is new. Like when you don't know what this does, that's what leads you to touch the hot stove when it's running. Your stick a fork in the electrical arc. Like, oh, what does this thing do? I mean, it's. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I was just gonna say, like you were saying, it seems like a lot of people in your channels under 18 are very proficient at lucid dreaming, and I think more and more the next generation are having more and more lucid dreams. If you look at the studies on, because a lot of the studies on university students, right? So it seems like, in my biased opinion, it seems like more and more people are having lucid dreams. Younger generations, right? Like it used to be, like, in general, it's about 50-50, some people have had lucid dreams, some people haven't. But I think that's changing. I think the ratio's changing to higher, where more people are having more lucid dreams.
Especially the more people that learn about it. I think the more popular we can make lucid dreaming, the more people will learn, and those ratios will shift over time. The more that people actually learn about this, because it is honestly really cool. As Jean-Luc Picard famously says in the opening to every Next Generation episode, to seek out new life and new civilizations, and to boldly go where no one has gone before.
That's right.
Not with that British accent that the French character is supposed to have.
Yep, that's exactly right. So it's looking good for the future. I'm very excited in all things lucid dreaming related, education, research. It's looking bright. So
do you think anyone anywhere might offer into some form of accreditation for just being able to teach lucid dreaming? Because there's a lot of those types of certifications out there. Honestly, that would be a good one to have. Would you ever consider authoring some or creating something like that? And would you partner with anybody to create some sort of certificate to have some more of accreditation for somebody who's trying to teach people?
Definitely, that is on the bucket list of the nonprofit. is
Yeah,
accreditation. So
I will be the first
yeah.
person to sign up for that, I am sure.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll
Um,
let you know when we get that program all up and running. It'll
because
probably be a little while, but
I definitely think having, close to 2 years of experience and constant, learning basically should qualify someone to a point where they can actually teach people. The question is, a lot of issues with being very formal about this stuff is having some sort of accreditation. You can't really be looked
exactly.
upon with, in the problem, one of the other issues is, academia is really good for certain things, but it also tends to discount other things. Like, for example, learning outside of traditional academic institutions usually isn't given the same level of respect as learning within the system. And so
Sure.
someone could have the same knowledge, but just learned it differently and not have the same level of respect.
That's right. Yeah.
Even if what you're saying is the exact same thing, you're kind of seen a little bit differently by the academic community. And so being credible is a little bit more difficult in those types of circles. So I do think having something like that, that was just for lucid dreaming, could allow somebody who learns differently to be able to apply that to a point where they could be seen as more credible in that specific field. I mean, dealing with specialization, I think specialization is a good thing, because I mean, we've been doing trades, trades, apprenticeships for throughout human history. That's been a thing. Someone specializes in a skill and gets really good at it and uses that skill. So I think that would be a really good thing to actually take that into account. So you don't have to, you maybe aren't going to learn about a whole bunch of other different things, but if you want to specialize in a specific area, or you want to learn and open your specializations up a bit, you could learn about specific things. You don't have to learn about every single little thing, but you can learn foundations. You can learn about specific things, and you could have some sort of reasonable understanding, because there are certain things that are easy to learn, and then there are a lot of things that are kind of really complex, and it really depends on what the specific topic is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So accreditation is helpful in that regard to garner a little bit more respect for the expertise that you already have through, book knowledge, experiential knowledge. And that's where I find lucid dreaming to be so unique, is there's people who have read about it and they have the book knowledge of it. And then there's people who have experiential knowledge because they've had a lot of lucid dreaming experiences themselves. And then there's people who have both, right? And I think both is so important for being a teacher of lucid dreaming.
Yes.
Because there's a lot that you learn on the book side, and there's a lot you learn on the experiential side.
You forgot one category. You forgot the group of people whose faces show up sideways on live streams.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, 100% though, because it's what is it? I think I've described wisdom this way to some people. People say wisdom is knowledge is knowing tomatoes are fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it on a fruit salad. Well, I think wisdom is having knowledge and knowing how to apply it.
Yeah, that's a great definition
how to apply the knowledge, and that's where the experience comes in. You can know about lucid dreaming, but a lot of what I find myself doing teaching, especially nowadays, is going, okay, well, here's what I learned, and I can relate it to specific experiences. Don't do what I did, because what I did was bad.
Exactly. Learn from experience.
I can tell people what created for me, for example, a maladaptive schema of dealing with getting really short lucid dreams and having to overcome that. It took me 6 months. I have that experience. I can tell people about it. Here are the issues I personally dealt with. Here's how I know these are the issues I've dealt with. Here's how I tried to deal with them. And here's what has worked for me personally. Now, this may work for you, this may not, but here's what worked for me. But here's how I learned. And that's kind of how I learned about dream control and how it kind of worked. Is I learned about a little bit about sort of schemata in a way, and then I also learned about, okay, well, how do different things. I'm really good at tracing things to their source. So using that analytical side, everything is analytical to me in that sense, where I can kind of trace dream elements to the source, and I can discover, okay, so I think this is associated with this, and this, or my emotions are getting in the way. I could have, I could be thinking of the correct things, and then my emotions are just getting in the way of that. And actually, through hundreds of lucid dreams now, I've been able to identify, okay, here's where I have issues when I'm actually trying to do something, and I can actually pass that experience on. So the experience is really important, but then being able to codify that experience and to explain it, to understand how it works within the, the scientific literature is also important. It's very important.
For sure. Definitely.
So that's kind of where I am, at least right now.
It's a good place to be, especially on the experiential night. You can always read more books and science studies on it, but it takes a while to gain that experiential knowledge, right? Well, not in your case. Hell, a couple years and you have had hundreds of experiences. But again, you're a rare form.
Years. Yes,
so,
yeah.
I'm
just
not the norm.
I count the days, man. Like, I actually count the days. Like, I do.
I know you do, Ryan. I know you do.
But it's really cool. But I kind of learn by learning and by doing to an extent. Like, I can learn how to, I mentally map, so I kind of learned by navigating, and I map everything. I learned, so I did mock trial. Okay, I don't have a law degree by any sense of the imagination, and I wasn't an attorney on our team when I did mock trial, but I paid attention to how they did things in practice, and then I actually read the rules of evidence, and I put those two things together, and we had a fall tournament. This was back at my old school. This is 2019. We had a fall tournament at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. And I joined the Buybuster team on 2 days because I didn't have a role on one side of our trial. And so on the second day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go for it and try to be an attorney. That's not my role. That's not what I've actually done. And I went in and improv being an attorney.
Yeah.
And I ranked. That means I was in the top 3.
That's awesome.
I ended up impeaching a witness by following the exact procedure. I watched my team practice several times because I remember.
That's awesome.
And that's how I learned to do things.
Yeah.
The witness was also
learning by doing. It's a real thing, especially in the lucid dreaming world. For sure.
It's really fun, and that I can adapt to that kind of a situation. Kind of learn kind of that way to an extent. It kind of depends on the thing, but I'm really good at like conceptual knowledge and applying it in a sense, like learning how something is done. Pattern recognition is what I usually tell people. I'm very good at recognizing patterns. And one thing I actually thought about for me, just being curious in learning more about sleep science, is I thought about what if you took like say a PSG or like EEG type, you have the graph, right, with the waves on a graph, right? Well, I had a graphing calculator in high school that when you had a graphing function on it, you could hit a button and it would actually give you an auditory representation of that. So what if you could actually have an auditory representation in real time? Then at that point, all it is learning the patterns, and pattern recognition is already my strongest skill.
So, for sure.
At that point, it's learning patterns and learning how to recognize different patterns and what they mean, and that is easy. I mean, it's basic association. It's basically you take something, you associate it with what it means, you drill it and you practice it, and you have pattern. That's how I'm teaching myself Morse code right now. I'm actually teaching myself how to do Morse code. I don't think I told you this. I think I mentioned it at the conference that I was going to start doing this.
Yeah, you mentioned it.
I've got the letters A through O and S down now. I haven't gone past O just yet.
That's awesome. Good for you.
I can. Yeah. I'm doing that. I'm learning that. Dash is what really inspired me, doing the Morse code with eye movements for her.
For sure.
I taught myself to do the exact same thing just in case that it ever becomes useful at any point in the future.
Well, I'm sure it will be, especially with the lucid dreaming stuff. You got to communicate somehow with.
And I'm coming up with my own communication codes based on a game that I played that involves long distance communication with very specific, like very long time intervals. Like it takes a minute to communicate a single letter, so you have to come up with codes in shorthand. And so I'm coming up with shorthand.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, shorthand would be really helpful for communicating with lucid dreamers, for sure.
Yes,
on the research
and then coming up with specific signals to say, like, starting a task, ending a task. And I'm also thinking about, okay, well, what if you're cueing someone to remember a task? What if you're trying to help someone with their memory? You come up with a specific shorthand phrase. You don't want to say something too long and complicated, because one, the idea could be incorporated incorrectly, and two, too much could wake somebody up. So you want something short, concise, that gets the point across. And the way I would actually go about that is train the person ahead of time to where, as soon as they hear that, they immediately associate that to what they are supposed to be doing in the dream. So it becomes
that can be helpful.
Yep. And I think it'd be really easy. I actually think about the what ifs, and I think about what an actual procedure would be like for some of the stuff. And that's just my brain. When I'm sitting around by myself just thinking, that's the kind of crap I think about.
Well, that's awesome, because that's the type of stuff that researchers think about is all the little details,
I have a really good question here. I have a good question here. Okay, Bud says, is there anything that you think is overlooked or mostly unknown when it comes to lucid dreaming? This question is for both of you, and I'll give this one to you because I think this is definitely more up your area of expertise.
Is there anything that's overlooked or mostly unknown? I mean, I feel like I'm biased in the sense of it's such a small field. Everything's overlooked and unknown. I feel like no one's really taking it too seriously. I mean, we're just now starting to have like sleep labs that
Mhm.
are spending a lot of their resources on researching lucid dreaming. So, um, anything in particular, I think is overlooked and unknown. Again, I'm biased, but the healing thing, I think the power of the mind is incredible, and the mind body connection, being able to access more of that through lucid dreaming, I think is an incredibly potent way to possibly heal ourselves in various ways of various ailments. Like for my dissertation, I focused on chronic pain relief through lucid dreaming, and I found 10 people who had the experience, and the results were powerful. And again, it's a small sample size, so it's very exploratory pilot type study. But with those people, statistically speaking, the results were significant. They started before the lucid dream with about, I think, 6.5 on the 1 to 10 pain scale, and then afterwards, with one single lucid dream, they were about a 2. And that's incredibly powerful. All these people walking around in chronic pain, there's about 1 in 5 people with chronic pain. And quality of life just decreases, right? I mean, I know I'm a baby when I become sick or get in chronic pain, or any kind of pain.
Right
So
there with
I,
you.
I would have to, I mean, I would love to help these type of people get some of their life back, get some of their quality of life back. So, and that's just one ailment, there's a lot of different ailments. And with that dissertation study, there was a couple people who had permanent relief. They had years of chronic pain, and then with a single lucid dream, gone. Like, that is powerful.
Yeah.
And that could really help people all around the world. So I think healing, I think there's a lot of potential there. Not to mention, the general one of nightmares and all that kind of stuff. So with our nonprofit, there's actually 3 different focuses that we're kind of narrowing on in terms of research, the therapeutic focuses, and that is nightmares, chronic pain, and just general well-being.
Mhm.
Because health is not just an absence of illness, right? It's about experiencing positive emotions, decreasing negative emotions, and a lot of other different factors. And I think lucid dreaming can help a lot in that realm as well. So yeah, I would say in general, healing. That's kind of my biggest focus
I
anyway.
would, yeah, I'd say the brain, honestly, in terms of the unknown, because you can kind of map certain things to certain things, but you still don't know how all this stuff works. It's like knowing how to
Yeah.
fly an airplane versus knowing how to build one. Well, you can learn how to work it, you can learn how to do things that cause the airplane to do what you want it to do, but that's not the same as knowing how all of the components work and how to build one.
Yep.
Like do you know it well enough? It'd be like if you found an alien energy weapon on the surface of the planet, and it was shaped somewhat like a gun, and you were able to find out how to fire it and shoot it. Well, you could use
Yeah.
that alien energy weapon, but
Yeah.
that
You
doesn't
would
mean you can
know how
build
to
it.
fix it if it
You
broke.
wouldn't know how to
Yeah.
build it, to
Yeah.
fix it, how it works. I mean, so you
For
can
sure.
do something to make it work the way you want it to, but that doesn't mean you understand how it works. And that's where
Yep.
I think a lot of the research
Exactly.
is heading in terms of neuroscience. There's a lot of research to be done, a lot of
Yep.
technological research. And back to
Understanding
nightmares for a second.
consciousness. That's a
Yeah,
big one.
back to nightmares for a second, because I think technology could be really useful here. And one thing I thought about is, so what if you have someone who is in a nightmare, and instead of just like cueing, having a device that's, instead of just cueing them when they're dreaming to notice they're dreaming, specifically cues them when they develop, when they show any sign of tells, like any elevated stress or any type of things like that,
Hmm.
and to cue them in those specific intense scenarios where someone is most likely to forget that they're dreaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could that be
I
something
think
that
that's
is useful, like in a very specific
definitely.
application?
Yep.
Like that, the
Yep.
technology itself already needs work in terms of the automatic queuing. That already needs work, but I mean, you could actually maybe program it to physiological responses,
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
as
And I think
sleep
that's a great
patterns.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's definitely possible. There's
Mhm.
like factors involved in the sense of, physiology doesn't always match phenomenology, like what you're actually experiencing.
Mhm.
But in general, I think that's, it's pretty accurate. So
Yeah.
yeah. definitely. That would be a good application for
Yeah,
sure.
I think it would be there. I think there's several different ways you could do. Like you could have a device program to, like say it was combined with something like like counseling or therapy, where you're talking about someone and you're teaching them lucid dreaming while you're doing therapy with them, and then
Mhm.
you get to a point where okay, well they need to remember to practice what you taught them like in the actual dream. Well, you could have a recording of them telling themselves to practice what they taught them or what the thing is that they were supposed to try to do. Like you
Yeah.
could have
Mhm.
something, you could actually have something that is part of a larger process. It doesn't have to be
Yep.
just a standalone thing either.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think there are a lot of applications for technology. I just think the technology itself
Oh
needs to
yeah,
be improved to an extent for the automatic side of
100%.
things, but
Yep.
I do think there are a lot of applications.
Yeah, I agree completely for
I'm a
sure.
big fan of
Especially
technology.
actually helping
Yeah.
people have the
Mhm.
experience to begin with, which
Yes.
is, a barrier to kind of break through in order to become more frequent at it.
Technology makes my
Well,
life the way it is possible. I'm a big fan of technology.
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't be online without screen reading software, computers. I wouldn't be navigating around without my cane or without decent
Mhm.
transportation systems. The computer has really made my life very, very useful and more meaningful because there's so much that I can do with technology. So I'm a big fan of technology.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of improvements in technology, development technology, and definitely could would love to be kind of involved with I'm looking in I joined Tech for Dreaming because if they have any technology they want to test, I would love to be involved in something like that too. Also
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah, that'd be cool.
accessibility side, as I think I'm the only blind person who's actually talking to people who research this on a regular basis, at least
Mhm.
that I know of.
Yeah.
I'm a grand total sample size of one. Very, very, very.
Hey, that isn't a bad thing,
I hear that's very accurate for purposes of study. So,
What's
having a
that?
sample size of one, I hear is a really good thing to have, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
super accurate, statistically speaking.
We'll
No,
get
but
statistically
in all
significant results.
seriousness, the case
Yeah.
study, that it can really be helpful. So
Mhm.
yeah, don't discount yourself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential there for sure.
Yeah. You got a good taste of my sense of humor in July, so yeah, you're pretty familiar with it, I think, by now.
For sure. For sure.
But yeah.
Well,
This
Ryan,
is a
I
good question.
gotta
Oh,
get
sorry.
going here pretty soon. Do we have I could take like one final question.
Yes, this is actually a good one, I think, right here.
Okay.
Supernova 342. Doctor, question for Dr. Elliott. Do people with ADHD have a difference in REM than people without ADHD?
That's a great question. I don't know enough to know that. I would my guess, I'm almost positive there's research on this. So I would say look it up in Google Scholar, which is free to everyone. Just type in something like REM sleep in people with ADHD, and there's probably someone who's done comparisons and that sort of thing. I would guess that there is, and I would say probably the primary difference is mostly due to medications rather than the actual condition. But that's just my guess. How it would be different, I'm not really sure. I know with depression that there'll typically be more REM sleep and it's kind of displaced where there's more REM sleep at the beginning of the night than most people. But in terms of ADHD, I don't know. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd say reference Google Scholar because I would be surprised if someone hasn't done a study on that yet.
Well, thank you very much, Elliot. I know you got to go. This is really awesome. For reference, we
Yeah,
have
thank you.
an hour and 45 minutes live stream. I have all the time in the world, and I love
Yeah.
doing this. I could go forever, honestly.
Oh, I
I
love
could go
talking
until
about this
6.
stuff too.
I could go
Yeah,
until
yeah,
6.
right.
You know me. I'd like to
Yeah,
thank you very much, and
yeah.
I'd like to tell everyone listening, please check out Dr. Elliott Gish at luciddreamstudies.org, Organization for Lucid Dream Studies. Check out his self-study course. There are a couple of bugs in it, but I think he might find a way to work with some of them. I'm actually going through it right now and paying attention to it. There's one thing I would want to maybe point out. I'll point it out in an email, though. I'm not going to point it out here. I'll send you an email.
Okay.
But I would like to thank you very much for your time. Again, everyone, that's luciddreamstudies.org,
No
Dr.
problem.
Elliott Gish. Check out his research archive. If you're interested in learning about research, check out his self-study course.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say his private lessons are a little expensive, probably outside of everyone's budget, but his self-study course is free. Definitely worth the look. Thank you very much, Elliott. I do hope we can talk again sometime. I always enjoy these conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Have a good one.
You too. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. If you would like to learn more about Skyfall Blind Dreamer content and join more of my live streams, please subscribe to Skyfall Blind Dreamer if you've not done so already, and hit the notification bell for more notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. Thank you very much, and have a good day, whoever and wherever you may be.